Hey everybody, welcome back to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. I got a great show for you here tonight. Before we dive into the detriments of sugar, let me know where you're tuning in from in the world. So say hello, tell me where you're from, and we're going to dive into tonight's show. Tonight, it's all about sugar. Unless I guess we burned a marker here. So here we go. Sugar detriment. We're going to talk about 14 different ways that sugar can basically destroy your health. A lot of people talk about how sugar is unhealthy, but nobody really ever talks about why sugar is unhealthy. And so I hope that when you walk away from the show tonight, you're gonna take away these kind of big pearls to help you kind of keep your diet dialed in and away from that sugar. So again, sugar detriment is what we're talking about tonight. So number one on the list is immune suppression. And you've heard people talk about the link between sugar and cancer, and this is one of the issues. But early research done in the 1970s, and a lot of the really great research on sugar, a lot of that was done in the 70s, is actually before Harvard scientists were paid off to talk about how sugar really wasn't bad for you. There was a lot of really great research. And then we had this 2 to 3 decades of kind of diversion onto fat. So what happened is the sugar industry, this is actually recently written about and has been talked about in major media and news, that the sugar industry actually paid off some scientists to kind of distract the world from the health detriments of sugar. But immune suppression, there have been some studies that show that a bolus of sugar. Now, let's define a few things here, too, because before we just kind of demonize sugar, let's kind of preface this by talking about what I mean by sugar. This is added sugars. We're not talking about the natural sugars found in things like a piece of fruit or vegetables or the things. These are added sugars. So when you flip over and look at that food label, these are your processed foods that have added sugars, things like sucrose or dextrose or treacle or invert sugar or maltose or the high fructose corn syrup or fructose or maltodextrin. Like, these are some of the names that you might see on a food label that is indicative of added sugars. And again, added sugars is not the same thing as natural sugars that are found naturally in food. So when we talk about the detriment of sugar, we're really focusing in on when food manufacturers process foods and add sugars into them. So like your common examples would be packaged snacks, even lunch meats have added sugar, cured meats can have added sugar. Of course, candy is a no-brainer, hopefully, for anybody tuning in tonight. Candy is definitely or should be a no-brainer. But we talk about adding sugar to food to make it taste sweeter. And so one of the side effects to this is immune suppression. Now, immune suppression of the neutrophils, which are types of white blood cells that help defend your body, right? And so some research shows that up to 5 hours after an added sugar bolus, neutrophils become lazy and not as responsive. So in essence, if you're eating sugar periodically throughout the day, as many people do, many people drink a soda 2 or 3 times a day, every 5 hours or so, or have a piece of candy every few hours, what you're doing repetitively is suppressing neutrophil response, which again, over time is going to lead to that immune suppression. And so it's not a one-day issue or a one-time issue that we're concerned about. But if you're repetitively doing this over and over and over again, that immunosuppression is going to lead to a weakened immune system. And again, when we're suppressing the immune system, we become susceptible to things like colds and flus. We become susceptible to immune types of diseases. And of course, that actually is on our list today, which is increasing your risk for cancer. And we'll talk about more of that in just a minute. Now, number 2 on the list is contribution to fatty liver disease. Now, this is very important because fatty liver, and specifically the type of liver damage that is non-alcoholic or non-drug induced, because a lot of people have a fatty liver because they're on multiple medications and the drugs are having to be processed by the liver, so it's overwhelming the liver. A lot of people have a fatty liver as a result of aggressive alcohol consumption. So we're not talking about like drug-induced fatty liver disease as much as we're talking about sugar, right? Sugar contributes to fatty liver disease. And some sugars more so than others. So like in this example here, if we're talking about the primary sugar, it's fructose. Fructose contributes to fatty liver. It's very difficult for the liver to process fructose. And most foods today, most sugars today are actually from high fructose corn syrup. So concentrated fructose is what most people are when they're drinking sweetened beverages, when they're eating sweetened foods. The vast majority of the sugar, at least in the US, and this may be different overseas if you live in the UK or if you live in Australia or if you live in Europe, a lot of overseas still uses cane sugar, which is a sucrose and not a fructose, which is a little bit easier on the liver. But if you're getting your sugar predominantly from fructose, it can contribute to fatty liver disease. Now, the problem with that, when the liver becomes fatty, we get toxic buildup. And so then we end up in this chronic state of having to detox repetitively. And so many people have this problem where they're always trying to, we're coming up on the new year and everybody's going to be doing their New Year's resolutions. Well, they want to do a detox, right? Well, what do we detox from? Well, sugar is one of the things that a lot of people will attempt to detox from. And if you eat and drink enough sugar to create a fatty liver, it's going to make it harder for your liver to constantly work and help you on a daily basis. So toxic buildup is one of those things that can occur as a result of chronic sugar exposure. Okay, so let's move to number 3 on the list of detriments. And so one of the things that we know sugar can do is it accelerates aging. And this has actually been really well studied. Sugar accelerates the aging process. So if you want to get older faster, hopefully I'm appealing to anyone's vanity. If you want to get older faster, like eat more sugar. Very, very simply put. Sugar not only can it accelerate the aging process through creating what's called an advanced glycation end product, so an AGE. If you've ever heard this term, AGE, that's what that age, it's the acronym is on purpose, right? Advanced glycation end product. What that is, you probably heard me talk about this before. It's when you eat too much sugar, it creates an antioxidant or a free radical type of reaction in your body that basically creates damage to the proteins and the other elements in your bloodstream. And it leads to the production of these compounds called AGEs, advanced glycation end products. Think of it kind of simplistically like this. Too much sugar in your bloodstream makes your proteins and your hormones that float around in your blood, makes them sticky and thick and changes the way those proteins are folded, leading to damaged proteins that don't work as well. And these proteins are important. Why? Because they deliver vitamins, they deliver nutrients to your tissues, they deliver very important amino acids and other elements that helps your body heal and repair itself. So if your bloodstream is bogged down by sugar and bogged down by advanced glycation end products, you're not going to heal as quickly, you're not going to repair as quickly, and you're going to basically accelerate the aging process through accelerated damage to your tissues and damage to your DNA. Okay. Additionally, there's other research that shows that sugar can actually impair the memory. So, sugar can cause memory issues. And it's now being linked to dementia. Any of you who have followed me for any length of time have maybe heard me say that, there's a new name for dementia, and it's type 3 diabetes. And we all know that sugar can cause diabetes. It's actually one of our items on the list here. But it can cause memory dysfunction by creating the same advanced glycation end products. It can create them in your brain, and it can actually hinder creating inflammation of the brain and can hinder the way your neurons fire and communicate to each other. So we don't want excessive sugar if we want a good memory. If you want good, sharp mental clarity and good, sharp mental focus, avoid or ditch the sugar, and you'll have better clarity, better focus. Additionally, number 5, sugar creates oral inflammation. Now, you all know, you all grew up going to the dentist, most likely, if you live in an industrialized country, that is. And you've all heard the old, sugar causes cavities, and it does. Sugar is notorious for feeding the wrong types of bacteria in the mouth that produce acid and other chemicals that erode away the enamel on the teeth, leading to the contribution of caries, dental caries, or cavities. So this has been known for a very, very long time, but what's a little maybe less known, aside from the cavities component, is sugar can cause inflammation of the gums. So the gum line itself can become inflamed as a result of sugar exposure, making the collagen in your gums weaker, making you more at risk or susceptible to losing your teeth. Now, why is that so important? Aside from vanity, right? We don't want to have like missing teeth, but our teeth are designed to chew our food, right? And so if we're trying to optimize our nutrition, if we're trying to really be solid with our vitamins and our minerals and extrapolating the nutrients from the food that we're eating, we need our teeth to do that. And dentures don't work as well. Any of you who've ever had like false teeth, you could vouch for this, is that they don't work as well as your regular teeth. So when you start losing teeth, you start losing your capacity to get to the nutrition from your food, and that can create a host of different types of problems around getting repair. Remember, you need these vitamins, you need these minerals to help you heal and repair. You need these vitamins and minerals to generate energy. You need these vitamins and minerals to protect you from the environment, to boost your immune system, to repair your skin, to heal your gut. Like, vitamins and minerals are the molecular workhorses of the body. So if you destroy your oral health as a result of overconsumption of sugar, you're going to destroy your capacity at getting nutrients from the food that you eat, because you won't be able to chew effectively. And that brings us to number 6, which is it causes vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Vitamin and mineral deficiencies in several different ways. Okay, so number one, it's been shown in a number of research studies that people that have high levels of sugar in their diet, actually, it causes a depletion of minerals and B vitamins. Remember, for every molecule of sugar that you consume, sugar is an empty calorie. Okay, and if we're really trying to understand why we shouldn't eat empty calories, you have to understand that for every calorie you consume, your body has to have B vitamins and minerals like chromium and magnesium and zinc and selenium. In order to break those sugar molecules down and to get the energy from them, you need the nutrients. So if you're eating an empty calorie that doesn't contain the nutrients but does contain the calorie, then where does your body get the nutrients to break that calorie down and generate energy from it? From you, right? It gets it from your storage. So it actually steals from you to process the empty calories of sugar so that you can try to drive some semblance of energy production from that sugar that you just ate. And so if you do this chronically, repetitively, day in and day out, what ends up happening is you become malnourished. And this has been really well studied. There are hundreds of research studies that show that sugar consumption can contribute to vitamin and mineral deficiency or loss or accelerated excretion or accelerated use. So if you want your nutrition status to be terrible, eat more sugar. Okay. Now, so that's number 6. Let's move on to number 7 on our list. And we talked about immune suppression. Let's put 7 down here. Sugar increases the risk for cancers. There have been a number of major studies, especially here recently. There's more light that's been being shown on this area in research. And so there are a number of different types of cancers that we know sugar can increase your risk for. So again, look at the number. It's arguably the number 1 or number 2 cause of death, at least in the United States, is cancer, right? We get about 1 million people every year that die from cancer. That don't need to die from cancer. Yet, I was a couple of years ago, I was at one of these fun runs. It was a breast cancer awareness run, and so what they were selling at the event was appalling to me. There was actually this little stand where they were trying to raise money for cancer awareness, and what were they selling? They were selling Coca-Cola and they were selling donuts. So like, here everybody's trying to come together to raise awareness for cancer, and the thing that they're feeding the people at this event and selling to these people at this event are both loaded with sugar, both known to contribute, Coke and donuts, to contribute to the increased risk for cancer. So very, very bad idea. We don't, obviously, we know that sugar feeds cancer cells, but we also know now that, sugar suppresses neutrophils, suppresses immune function, and can lead to cancer becoming more stronger or having the capacity to grow and basically put you at jeopardy or put you at risk. So if you don't want cancer, avoid sugar. Okay, type 2 diabetes. Now, it's called sugar diabetes for a reason, right? And this should not be like a news flash for any of you, but sugar causes diabetes, and we're talking about type 2. So any of you that with insulin dependent, just calm down. Don't go crazy on me. Type 2 diabetes is a known factor, sugar is a known causative agent. It's causative, meaning that, we've talked about diabetes in the past. This is a disease of choice. Type 2 diabetes is 100% a disease of choice. You have the choice to not have it, and if you do have it, you have the choice to put it in remission, but you have to change your diet. It's whether or not you're going to be willing to choose to change what you eat. But sugar creates type 2 diabetes, and there's no doubt about it. The research on this is very, very clear. Additionally, we know that sugar increases the risk for heart disease. For cardiovascular disease, we'll just include not just the heart, but also the blood vessels. So cardiovascular disease, it definitely increases the risk for developing cardiovascular disease in part. And some of these have overlap because when you eat sugar, it creates advanced glycation end products that create inflammatory processes in your blood vessels, including your heart. And it's, remember, I've talked about this before, when you have a blood vessel, okay, blood's flowing this way, and you get damage to the lining of the blood vessel, to that endothelial lining of the blood vessel. Let me make that a tube. Okay. What happens? This is inflammation, right? Well, what causes the inflammation? Doctors always talk about your disease is inflammation caused. What causes the inflammation? Well, we know these advanced glycation end products can contribute to an inflammatory process leading to that vascular endothelial lining damage, increasing the risk for the development of heart disease, but also of plaque formation, atherosclerotic plaque formation. So make no bones about it. This is being studied. We also know sugar, on a side note, increased sugar, and we're talking about added sugars here, increased risk of high blood pressure. So, technically high blood pressure or hypertension is different than cardiovascular disease. Hypertension is actually one of the risk factors for cardiovascular disease, right? So if sugar can elevate your blood pressure, obviously it's going to increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. Sugar can also increase your triglycerides. And so these are good markers. You should be monitoring your blood pressure. You should be monitoring your triglycerides at least on an annual basis with your doc. And so sugar, remember what triglycerides are. It's fat in the bloodstream. So if you overconsume sugar, your body naturally converts that sugar into triglycerides and then stores it as fat. And if you become overwhelmed with sugar, it will store those triglycerides in your liver. And as we were talking about earlier, where did it go? Fatty liver number 2. Okay, so if you're looking at where should your triglycerides be, less than 75. So if you're getting them measured, shoot for less than 75. If your triglycerides stay under 75, you're going to do a great thing at keeping, keeping your risk for heart disease at bay as a result of overconsumption of sugar, because fat really doesn't elevate your triglycerides to any great extent. It's actually sugar that does the bulk of elevating your triglycerides, which brings us to number 10, because now we see overlap in one more thing. So those triglycerides increase fat. So it leads to obesity or weight gain. So we know that sugar can actually cause you to gain weight, especially because too much excess sugar is stored as triglycerides, and then those triglycerides are stored as fat. And then you guess what? You just start packing on the pounds. So sugar, really technically number 9, number 8, number 9, number 10, number 2, really kind of all tie into each other, kind of all play into each other and together. Okay, let's move on to number 11. I'm going to appeal again to people's vanity here. How many of you, let's just poll the audience here. How many of you have ever been to the dermatologist and acne was part of the reason why you were there? Raise your hand if you have. Just type in acne. And you were told that acne and diet were not related. So if you were told that, just type in acne. diet so that I know how many of you out there have had this problem. So we hear this all the time from dermatologists that there's no correlation between diet and acne. Yet, one of the primary treatments for acne is what? Is synthetic vitamin A. This is one of the primary treatments that dermatologists use as a tool against acne. So if diet has nothing to do with it, why are they using a vitamin in order to help with acne? If we can use a synthetic analog of vitamin A, doesn't it make sense that vitamin A deficiency potentially could cause acne or contribute to it? And we know that vitamin A is necessary for the epithelial regeneration and repair of the skin. So it makes sense that there's a correlation there. But there's also research there. It's not just a correlation. There's several research studies that are now showing that sugar consumption changes hormonal interplay. So like if you're a guy, for example, there's a great study done on men eating high levels of sugar where they found that they changed these men's diet, and what happened is their estrogen levels fell by about 25% when they took them to a lower sugar diet. So these guys that were eating lots of sugar, their estrogen levels were 25% higher, and when they took the sugar out of the diet, the estrogen levels dropped. So we know sugar impacts hormones, but in terms of acne, we know it, and females especially, can actually accelerate androgen production and sebum production in the skin, which can lead to or contribute to acne formation. So we know sugar plays a role in acne. Don't ever let a dermatologist tell you otherwise. It definitely plays a role in the formation of acne, particularly inflammatory acne, because again, sugar creates an inflammatory process. Okay, number 12, behavioral problems. Some of my favorite research is in schools. There was a study done, I think it was in New York public school system, where they took the sugar out of the school cafeteria. Now, if you go to any major school cafeteria today, you know, most of the food that's being provided is pumped full of sugar and preservatives. It's junk food. And we're pawning that off on children. And then when they don't do well in school or they have disciplinary problems, we don't blame what we're feeding them, but we blame the kid. And that's a travesty, in my opinion. But anyways, research studies have shown that when you take the sugar and the preservatives and the garbage out of the food, that the grades actually increase. A study that was done in New York public schools found like a 17 or 18% increase in academic performance after removing sugar from the diet of the school. In essence, they couldn't go to school and get their sugar fix, right? I mean, some kids, their parents feed them well at home, but then send them with lunch money thinking their school's going to give them a proper meal. And what the school gives them is they give them, you know, Gatorade and Coca-Cola and all this other garbage, you know, because the food industry, unfortunately, has weaseled its way into the greedy pockets of school bureaucrats. So they're now they're giving schools money to put their garbage and brand your children and forever make them basically slaves they're creating a paradigm of normalcy around eating crap. I mean, that's what it boils down to. I can put it just that plainly. And it's creating behavioral problems in our kids. And if we look at what happens to a lot, especially our young men, is they're being called diseased, right? They're actually being labeled with terms like attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, and they're being medicated as a result. So they're being medicated because the schools have made deals to earn more money, right? To feed your kids garbage that changes and alters their brain waves and changes and alters the way that they think. And then when they feed your kids bad and they give your kids a disease as a result of poorly feeding them, then they want to have you pump them full of medications, right? And so now we have this whole generation coming out of school today. Many of them have been on Adderall or Ritalin, drugs that are basically legalized cocaine that are, you know, written by the prescription pad as your kids get these diagnoses. I feel a little strongly about this if you can't tell. And then, you know, now they have addiction problems with stimulants because Ritalin, like I said, it's a legalized form of cocaine, basically. I mean, it's not technically cocaine, but it hits the same receptors in the brain and creates the same types of response. So now these kids have been forced to take a drug to behave in school, you know, for the last 15 years or 20 years. And then they get out in the real world and they don't want to do stimulants anymore. And they have a hell of a time coming back from that and functioning. So you got to keep in mind that sugar creates behavioral problems. And one of the best things that you can do for your kids is take the sugar out of their diet. And, you know, if they're going off to school I don't personally trust the schools to feed my kids. So when my kids were younger and coming up through, I never sent them to eat school lunches. I always sent them with lunch, sent them with real food, so that I knew they were being properly taken care of. My point is, don't trust your schools to feed your kids, because your schools have legalized using ketchup as a vegetable. Like, that's what the schools do. I mean, ketchup is legally considered a vegetable according to the bureaucrats in the school system. They use that so that they can show that your kids are getting a certain amount of fruits and vegetables a day, ketchup included, which, again, that's preposterous. It's a travesty. So, behavioral problems, big time issues there. Now, number 13 on the list is candidiasis. If you've ever heard me talk about yeast before, or yeast overgrowth, that's what candidiasis is. It's a yeast overgrowth. There's a species of yeast that are, it inhabits most people. It's Candida albicans. You've probably heard of it before. But candidiasis is when you eat too much sugar, you overfeed the Candida albicans that most people are going to have naturally. But when you overeat sugar, you basically provide a fuel substrate for Candida to grow in excess. And so it creates a scenario where Candida actually becomes problematic. It grows out of control. Remember, Candida does a few different things. Number one, it takes the vitamins, it lives in your GI tract, and it steals the vitamins from the food that you eat to feed itself. So it actually works in a sense like a parasite. So it robs the vitamins and minerals from you. Now, this kind of ties back into what we were talking about earlier when we were saying that vitamin and mineral deficiencies were caused as a result of sugar consumption. This is another mechanism by which that can actually happen. So sugar feeds Candida. Candida overgrowth robs nutrients from you. But Candida overgrowth also, the more you feed it, remember what Candida does. It ferments sugars. So when you eat that, it produces alcohol. So there's actually a condition called autobrewery syndrome, where you eat so much sugar, you have such a severe candidiasis that you're basically making wine every day. And so it's like creating your own wine factory within your gut. Now, remember, a byproduct of alcohol is also acetaldehyde, which damages the brain, slows down your cognitive function, damages the liver. So you can see a lot of the overlap between what we're talking about tonight in terms of eating sugar. And so one of the biggest factors involved in that, in my opinion, is creating a scenario of massive candidiasis. Okay, number 14 on the list, 14 and final, but not the final. We could go on for a lot longer, but I decided to stop at 14, is fertility issues. Now, unexplainable fertility. I mean, we have epidemic rates of infertility occurring both in men and in women. And so some of the things that we know sugar can do. For females, sugar can contribute to a condition known as PCOS. PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And that has to do, PCOS is basically, it's diabetes of the ovaries. And so we already talked about number 8 here, diabetes being as a consequence of sugar production. So sugar production that manifests, sugar feeding that manifests as a PCOS can contribute to a major fertility or infertility issue. So you got to keep that in mind, that for women, this is one of the mechanisms. But additionally, even for men, I said earlier that sugar consumption versus lowered sugar consumption altered estrogen by 25%. Now think about that, men. What does that do to your testosterone? What does that do to your overall hormone profile? So additionally, we know that sugar, there have been some research that shows that sugar impacts sperm motility in men. So again, it's not just women that it affects, it's men and women that it affects. So if you are struggling to have a child, if you've been told that you're infertile, if the doctor wants to inject you with a bunch of hormones to try to force fertility and you haven't quit sugar yet, don't go the route of hormone treatments in vivo or artificial insemination or any of those other processes unless you've done your own homework and done your own diligence. Because if you can't get pregnant, it's because you're not healthy most of the time, unless you have like a physical manifestation where your ovary is got a, when I say a physical manifestation, I mean, there's some women that only have one ovary. There's some that have short or small fallopian tubes. There are some that have a physical problem with the anatomical structure, and so it's harder for them to get pregnant. But if you're not capable of getting pregnant and you're eating sugar and you're eating it as if it's normal and okay and just fine, that's one of the first things that you should do. if you've got that diagnosis of infertility, especially of unknown origin. Okay, so those are the 14 that I want to talk about. And again, I want to emphasize that this is added sugars. Now, we talk about food, and you've heard me talk a lot about food. I want to just put up on the screen the definition of food for you and just let you read that for a minute and just chew on that. So food is supposed to be something that we consume, right, that provides the nutrients that we need. And in essence, those nutrients are designed to help us produce energy, stimulate growth, and maintain our life, right? And so sugar doesn't fall within that definition at all. And again, added sugar. We're talking about added sugars. We're not talking about natural sugars, but added sugars do not fall within that definition because these are empty calories. These are things that if we only ate them, it would actually end up killing us. And for many, it does end up killing you. It might take several decades, but it does end up killing you. So keep that in mind, that food and sugar in our society today, we have this society where people believe that, sugar is part of our food and that it's not a big deal. And this is apparent and obvious in the way that people choose to eat, and the way that people will drink soda every day, and the way that people will just consume high sugar foods, high sugar cereals for kids, sugary drinks. One other thing I'll mention is fruit juices. There was a study recently that compared fruit juices to sugar and found that fruit juices were just as bad as sugar. So again, when we're talking about food, a lot of your highly heated fruit sugars that are ultra pasteurized, remember the juices themselves, the nutritional value is virtually non-existent. So what you're basically left with is a high level of sugar calories with very little nutritional value. So again, that doesn't fit the definition of food. So lesson number one is be real to yourself, be honest to yourself. It doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. If they all, as your mom and dad probably used to say, if everyone else was jumping off a cliff, would you follow them? Well, that's kind of the way our society works right now. Everybody's eating sugar, so that means that everybody can eat sugar and that it's perfectly okay. Yet heart disease and cancer and diabetes kill more of us virtually than any other condition, and sugar is linked to all three of those diseases. So I feel pretty strongly about not eating sugar, the same way I feel about not eating gluten. Like if you could just take two groups of things and have the best impact on your health overall, would be eliminate sugar from your diet today, and it would be also to eliminate gluten if you are a gluten sensitive individual. Now, some people are probably going to ask, what about natural sugars? So I'm going to answer that question really quickly, because are there natural sugars that can be consumed that are not going to be considered part of this added sugar? Again, dextrose, fructose, maltodextrin, the whole battery, a barrage of different sugar names that we have. But what can be used? What are some natural sugars that can be used? Honey and maple are probably two of the best. Now, a caveat on both of these, that doesn't mean eat all the honey you want and slather all your food in maple or maple syrup. It just means if you're going to use something natural to sweeten, if you're going to have something sweet, use something natural that has real food value and real nutritional value to it, and is not just an empty calorie. But it still doesn't mean that these things should be primary staple foods in your diet, where you're just changing out your sugar for honey or changing out your sugar for maple. Like, that's not something that you should do either. But when you're producing in the kitchen, when you're making food that you want to create that has a sweet flavor for your family, it's holiday season, right? Then you should feel comfortable and confident that you could use these things and you wouldn't be providing a source of empty calories that would basically provide these 14 detriments to your family. Okay, let's open it up for some questions. What about fake sugars? Let's see. Is monk fruit a healthy substitute? Okay, we got a lot of questions coming in. So, can high levels of testosterone also cause acne? Yes, it can. And that's one of the detrimental side effects for excessive sugar consumption. When I say androgen, I said androgen earlier, but testosterone is a type of androgen. It's a growth hormone, right? It's a growth stimulatory hormone that can be elevated by excessive sugar consumption. So yes, it can be. It can definitely be a cause. Okay, let's see. Is monk fruit a healthy substitute? Yeah, you could put monk fruit on the list. But my advice is, it hasn't been around super long, right? Some people would also put stevia on this list, but if you've got gut problems, stevia might not be the best solution for you. Honey might not either, because honey is very high in fructose. And a lot of people with gut problems like SIBO don't do well with honey and do better with maple. But again, all of these are really somewhat options. I would say that the monk fruit would be the least of the four, in essence, the bottom of the list. Now, some people might also use sugar alcohols like xylitol, and you got to be careful with these if you're trying to follow the no grain, no pain diet. Some of them are corn derivative. Now, xylitol derived from a birchwood is perfectly acceptable. But again, is it healthier, let's say, than something like a honey or maple? Not in my opinion, no, it's not. So again, these are all acceptable, but none of these things, in my opinion, should you have in your diet as a staple food. Now, another question coming in is about molasses. Has all the nutrients taken out of sugarcane? Molasses is like the dark substance left over from sugar processing. So they when they boil the sugar, they take out the clear element, and that's what goes into making crystallized sugar. And everything that's left is the molasses. So you could use molasses, as another alternative sugar that is not going to be a completely empty calorie. But again, what I've said a moment ago stands. Don't make it a staple food in your diet if you're using it on occasion. Agave is another one. Somebody's asking about agave as a form. Agave, highly processed. It's probably not one that I recommend aggressively either. I mean, you could use it, but high in fructose, not necessarily one I would recommend. So I kind of will put a down or arrow next to that agave. Do the sugar substitutes cause similar issues besides all their other bad attributes? Depends on which one. So like your sugar substitutes, if we're talking about like aspartame and NutraSweet and saccharin, I don't recommend any of those because some of them are linked to cancer, some of them are linked to neurological problems. All of them are pretty much linked to weight gain and blood sugar and insulin problems. They still create the blood sugar spiking, even though they're considered to be non-calorie sweeteners, they still have the blood sugar effect, which then leads to the insulin effect. So remember, when you have an increase in blood sugar, this is going to spike the insulin. And over time, this is going to increase cortisol, and this is going to increase fat storage. And so, these artificial sweeteners that are designed to be calorie-free still end up leading to the same type of outcome or scenario hormonally, and you don't need that in your life. How about honey, which is local, unfiltered, and non-heated? I use for my hot tea. Does it act like processed sugar? No, there's actually nutrients in honey, and there's some nutritional benefit to taking honey. But again, it's not something you should just slather up on everything. Again, the key here, hopefully you guys are getting the tone of the message, which is keep it reasonable. And what does that really mean, keep it reasonable? Like you shouldn't be striving to eat sweets and cookies and chocolates and candies on a daily basis. Like that to me, that's going to land you in trouble. If you make it habitual, it's going to land you in trouble. My thoughts on sucralose, bad idea. I don't like sucralose. One, it's a chlorinated version of sugar. So they add chlorine to the sugar molecule. And chlorine is a halide that can interfere with thyroid hormone function. It actually can interfere with iodine uptake into your thyroid gland. So if you're using heavy levels of sucralose in a lot of your foods and as a sweetener alternative, you could very potentially be creating and contributing to an iodine deficiency and to a low thyroid function. And remember, aside from this, which still leads to fat storage and increase in insulin blood sugar problems, that can also affect your thyroid. So now imagine what happens when your thyroid drops. You gain weight. Well, if it's already creating a hormonal change that causes you to store more fat, and now it's creating a potential for your thyroid, now we've got just one more thing that's going to make us gain weight quicker and slow our metabolism down and make us heal more slowly and create problems for us. Okay, aspartame gives my son terrible migraines. Yeah, I mean, those sugars, I just don't recommend them. Can I give a recap on optimal blood sugar levels, fasting and non-fasting? So if you're talking about fasting blood sugar is really what you want to measure. If you're talking about non-fasting blood sugar, it's all over the map. So I would worry less about the non-fasting and worry more about the fasting. 60 to 90 is where you want your blood sugar to sit, and this is in a fasted state. So 60 to 90. Now, the new numbers on some of the labs, if you're going to your doctor nowadays, there's actually lab ranges that are more like 70 to 110. That's what they're kind of reporting as normal. And understand why the variance, why that big difference, because as the population becomes more obese and more diabetic, those numbers actually go up. About every 10,000 or more samples that a lab runs, they will recalibrate the ranges based on the samples that have been coming through. So normal sick is becoming the new norm. You have to remember that, 20 years ago when I first started practice, this was the norm. Today, 20 years later, this is kind of the new norm on a lot of the different labs. And the same thing, we see the shift in a lot of blood markers. As the population gets sicker, the norms reflect the sick population instead of reflecting what should be ideal as a healthy population. I take molasses to up my iron levels. Any idea for substitutes? Yeah, eat liver. If you really want to up your iron levels, eat more liver. Liver is a great source of iron. And if iron upsets your stomach supplementally, that's just one great way to get it. Let's see here. Would depression and anxiety in adults fit with higher sugar intake? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I didn't really talk about depression, but that would fall under the behavioral problems category. There's a lot of research studies that show that sugar causes brain inflammation that can tend to lead toward depression. Remember, sugar, when it feeds, this is another mechanism, but sugar feeds candidiasis, right? And so you have to remember that 90% of your serotonin and 60% of your dopamine, as far as we know today, is produced by the healthy bacteria that live in your gut. So if you have an overgrowth of candida in your GI tract as a result of sugar consumption, it's like having too many weeds in your garden. And so the weeds, so to speak, the candida weeds snuff out your good, healthy bacteria. And so they're not producing the neurotransmitters that help keep you happy, like the serotonin and the dopamine. This is actually one of the connections between how excessive sugar consumption, added sugar consumption can contribute to depression and mood changes as well. Let's see. What effect does sugar have in autoimmune disease like celiac and Hashimoto's? Well, if we're talking about celiac disease, sugar, remember, feeds a candida problem. And this is one of the problems in celiacs already is they've got so much gut damage and villus atrophy that they're malabsorbing. So they're already malnourished. What's one of the side effects of having celiac disease is having lots of vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Well, when you have a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies and your immune system doesn't work quite as well because you're low in nutrients, it opens the door for you to become more susceptible to something like a candidiasis. So feeding that sugar to a celiac is a very bad idea because sugar is, counter-nourishing. You're already malnourished and now you're taking in a nutrient that further causes deterioration in your nutritional status. And the whole premise behind healing from celiac disease, we got to get nourishment back to that person. So eating sugar would definitely act as a counter-nourishing agent to cause further vitamin and mineral deficiencies that put you in a position where your body's not capable of recovering or healing. And as a matter of fact, gastroenterologists agree on this. There's been a lot of research on this with celiac disease. Is the vast majority of people with celiac disease following a traditional gluten-free diet, meaning elimination of wheat, barley, and rye only, they don't have recovery of their villi. They don't have a reduction, or not necessarily a reduction. They do have a reduction, but they don't have an elimination of the inflammation in the GI tract. And we believe this is part of the reason why is that they're just trading out the wheat, barley, and rye-based foods for other grains like corn, rice, and oat, but they're also eating and consuming a lot more sugar. And many of these gluten-free food items that really, one, aren't gluten-free, but two, contain a lot of sugar, are detrimental. Remember, we're already malnourished. We can't eat sugar and expect that to help us overcome the malnourishment. Okay, looks like a lot of you are asking about how, like that idea form says sugar equals rust. Yeah, I agree. It does. It equals rust, but really even more. It's like pouring honey all over the floor and then in your house, right? And just imagine if the entire floor in your house was coated with honey, and then you were walking around and then walked on your carpet and walked on your flooring and then got in your bed and then walked outside and tracked in all the dirt, and the honey just grabbed on all the dirt, and over time it would just be a complete nightmarish mess. How to get rid of a blood clot that my husband has been taking blood thinners for over a year. Well, Stacy, the first thing is first, have him quit eating sugar. I mean, I'm not gonna talk about blood clots tonight in so much great detail, but have him quit eating sugar. Have him quit eating things that we know cause inflammation, because blood clotting itself, excessive or aggressive blood clotting, occurs when the platelets are too sticky and too clumpy. Okay, and sugar can do that. But so can the side effects of toxic levels of sugar. Okay, so sugar, for example, causes magnesium deficiency, and magnesium is necessary to thin the blood. Sugar can also contribute to omega-3 fatty acid deficiency, which is also necessary to thin the blood. So if you're trying to help your husband who's had a clot, and you're trying to make sure that that his blood is healthier as he moves into his future, then make sure first and foremost that he's not eating foods that are inflammatory like sugar. You might also look at having him tested for gluten sensitivity, and or begin with a process like no grain, no pain. If you just kind of want a blueprint of what he might be able to follow, that it'll have a lot of profound effects on him nutritionally. Follow phase 1 and phase 2 diet and no grain, no pain. Buy him the book for Christmas and start it with him and start your new year off right. Let's see. Fatima says it's best to eat one time a day at home without sugar drinks, snacks, just water and nuts. What are we supposed to eat with sugar with such high toxicity everywhere? I'm not quite sure I understand the bulk of that question. It's not. So first of all, it's not best to eat one time a day, not for everyone. Now, some people do better eating one meal a day, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that if your blood sugar can tolerate that and you're not, hypoglycemic. But what are we supposed to eat with such high toxicity everywhere? You eat real food, and that's the premise that you always start with. You always start with the premise of just eating real food, because if you start from the premise of eating processed food, there is no hope. You're basically going to be victimized as a result of eating food that counter-nourishes you slowly over time. In my opinion, sugar is one of the worst poisons because it's a slow poison. If it killed you overnight, nobody would eat it, but it kills you slowly over time, so everybody eats it and justifies it. So start by eating real food, and then go from there. Let's see here. Sugar alcohols. What about sugar alcohols? I think I mentioned sugar alcohols earlier. Xylitol is an example of that. And there are a number of other sugar alcohols, but again, many people struggle. If you have like gastrointestinal bloating, or if you suffer from indigestion a lot, like probably sugar alcohols are not going to be the best choice for you because they can cause a lot of gas and bloating. So if you've never tried sugar alcohols, and the rule of thumb is I would recommend xylitol from birchwood first. And number 2, very small amount, just to kind of get an idea for how well you tolerate it. Because I've had some people that they go in and they go all in with a major recipe, and they use a high level of those sugar alcohols, and then they're like pregnant for a day, or even in some cases even worse for a week, for several days. So Be Happy Now says, so one soda is bad. You're right. Be Happy Now. I hope you're still happy after I tell you that. Yes, one soda is bad. Look, soda is poison. Soda is complete garbage. It's toxic poison. Not only is most soda in an aluminum can, but it's loaded with sugar. And if it doesn't have sugar, it's got artificial sweeteners that are either neurotoxins, carcinogens, or still create the same type of blood sugar issues that regular sugar does. Like, you just understand that water is a drink of champions. And if you want to be a warrior and you want to, reclaim and recapture your health, like, what's wrong with water? Everybody's talking about how water tastes, it just doesn't have any taste. It's because your taste buds are so inundated with sugar that it doesn't have any taste. And so remember, getting off of sugar, that's a big challenge for many people. There's an addiction quality to sugar. It's one of the things we didn't really talk about, but sugar can create an addiction, right? And so sometimes cutting it, we feel worse before we feel better. But you definitely want to understand that one soda, half a soda, a quarter soda a day is bad for you. There is no quantity of processed added sugar that is good for you. And so again, does that mean that you can never have a cookie, that you can never have a treat? No. But my advice to you is use these things on this side of the equation if you're going to do that, and just don't make sure again that they're not major staples in your diet. And because it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you achieve health, and it's certainly not going to help you to any great degree maintain longevity or quality of life. Let's see here. What supplements do you recommend to control blood sugar spikes throughout the day? The number one supplement, the number one deficiency, I should say, linked up to blood sugar spikes is chromium deficiency. And so I actually have a specific type of chromium. It's called ultra chromium that I would recommend. If you are struggling with a blood sugar issue and you want to support your blood sugar nutritionally, Chromium's a great thing to look at. Additionally, magnesium. And I have another formulation of 4 different forms of magnesium. It's called Ultra MG. It's a very pure source of magnesium that can also, for many people, can help with blood sugar support as well. So those are probably two of the the most common. But if you want to learn more about this, I would suggest that you go back, if you're new to the Dr. Osborne Show and you haven't checked out some of my archives on YouTube, go check out some of my master classes. I've done a master class on blood sugar and what you need to know about the vitamins and the minerals associated with blood sugar control. And I think it'd be very helpful for you to check out that class. If in a weak moment you cave and eat a cookie, pie, cake, or a soda, how long before your body recovers? Well, first of all, let's think about it like what I said earlier, right? So sugar bolus, 5 hours, immune system crashes, okay? So at least 5 hours, at least from that perspective. But it's not about how long does it take for your body to recover as much as why did you have the weak moment? That's what I would encourage you to analyze, because if you're having a lot of weak moments, you really have to self-reflect, and you really got to ask yourself, why are you having those weak moments? Some people have weak moments because they have candidiasis, and candidiasis can cause severe sugar cravings. Some people have weak moments because they're under too much stress. Some people because they don't get enough sleep. Some people because they have a chromium deficiency or a magnesium deficiency. So if you find yourself having a lot of weak moments and kind of periodically going back to sugar, like as a crutch, in those weak moments, like start asking deeper questions, because otherwise you're just going to recreate the same cyclic pattern of having weak moments repetitively, wondering how long it's going to take for that weak moment to wear off. And I can speak from experience in this. Look, we all have eaten sugar in our life. We've all eaten probably way more sugar than we should have. But at this day and age, I don't consume it. And one of the reasons why I don't consume it is because I had enough weak moments that I analyzed it enough in the past to say, okay, why was I having these weak moments? And I made behavioral changes that set me up for success in the long run. And that's what I would encourage you to do, because that's where the health is going to be. What do I think of berberine supplements? A lot of people are taking berberine to regulate blood sugar because it does have some blood sugar regulatory effects. I actually have a formulation of berberine. That being said, I don't recommend that everybody take berberine to control their bad habits. Remember, when you take a plant-based medicinal supplement to correct a problem that could otherwise be corrected by your behavior or your choice, then what we call that is green medicine. You're using, nature's medicine toolbox to correct your bad behavior. And what you should be thinking about is not correcting your bad behavior, or rather correcting your bad behavior and not supplementing your bad behavior away. Like, behavior should come first. And then if your blood sugar is still out of control, then you can add to that something like a berberine to have a compounded effect. But you should also be thinking about adding exercise. I mean, one of the best ways to regulate blood sugar is to build muscle. And so many people avoid exercise like it's the plague. They run to sugar like it's the best thing, and then they avoid exercise like the plague. So it creates like this double dichotomy effect of a negative scenario that makes it really hard to overcome. Okay, the psyllium husk help with blood sugar control. It does in this sense. Remember that fiber doesn't really lower blood sugar. So remember I said earlier, it's the added sugar that's the problem. And one of the reasons why plant-based foods that contain sugar, like your fruits and vegetables, one of the things in those is fiber, right? And so what that fiber does is it slows down the digestive time, so it reduces blood sugar spiking, right? And one of the detrimental effects of too much sugar is the spike that we might get, that spike in blood sugar, that elevation. And so what fiber does is it slows down the digestion and the absorption of that glucose from the food that you eat so that it doesn't create that spike. Now, I know what many of you engineer minds are thinking. You're thinking, I'm just going to drink a glass of fiber and then pound a candy bar. Like, that doesn't work the same. You're not going to get the same effect just by trying to add sugar and fiber together. So it's the fiber in the natural plants and the natural foods that contain natural sugars that make it work. And so again, it's not the fiber. So don't necessarily, I mean, you can use fiber, but don't think that fiber is going to somehow lower your blood sugar if your diet's poor. Let's see, water is not pure because of fluoride. What is the best water purifier? my favorite, Fatima, on that is if you go over to my website, my foundation website, glutenfreesociety.org, and go to the shop, and there's a category under the shop called lifestyle. And so there are a number of different companies that I recommend, depending on what kind of water filtration that you're looking for, but you can check those companies out there. The best time to exercise, morning or night? No, neither. It's the best time to exercise is, when are you going to exercise? The best time to exercise is when you can put it together consistently. There's not a best time. I personally know myself, I exercise in the morning, because if I don't do it in the morning, I'm not going to do it at night. So the best time for me to exercise is in the morning. But some of you may be saying, well, for me, I'm not an early riser, and I do much better if I exercise in the evening. So if that's who you are, just make sure you're consistent with it. The best time to exercise is any time you can exercise consistently. Okay, what effect long-term will happen to you? If you're asking me, Lily, what effect will sugar have long-term on your mitochondria? It's a poison for your mitochondria. Remember, mitochondria are the little subunits inside your cells. Some people refer to them as the powerhouse of the cell. This is where energy is produced. So you take, for example, that glucose that's being broken down from the food that you're eating. It has to basically end up that we break that glucose molecule down, and then we turn those hydrogens through the mitochondria to generate energy. But if your cells are inundated with excessive sugar and excessive glucose, what you're going to do is you're going to burn through all the nutrients that drive mitochondrial function, and your mitochondria are going to become overwhelmed. And yeah, when they become poisoned and overwhelmed, they're not going to function very well, and that's going to lead to brain fog. It's going to lead to muscle pain. It's going to lead to liver detoxification problems. Those are kind of the three big areas where we see mitochondrial function begin to falter first. Like we see the brain, the liver, and the muscles affected because those three tissues utilize the most energetics or energy. And so the symptoms generally tend to show up there first. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, the yeast in the gut can crave sugar. If you've got candidiasis, you will crave sugar. And this is why one of the best ways to stop candidiasis is to implement not eating sugar. No brainer, right? Don't feed the beast, so to speak. Yeast being the beast, don't feed it. And some people do really well if they can do well without their blood sugar dropping too low. Some people do really well with fasting with candidiasis. So, a 16 8-hour fast strategy works really well. But if you want to go even longer or even deeper, you can do 24-hour fast. You can do water fast. Those are something that can work really well to help try to starve out a candidiasis overgrowth. Okay. Looks like we've hit the end of the night, folks. We're at the hour mark. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for all your wonderful questions. Make sure you do me a favor before you leave tonight. I want you to type in, if you enjoy the information that I come out with every week, I need you to help me reach more people. So do a couple things for me. Number one, type into your comment box, hashtag save 100 million lives all together. Don't put a space, just hashtag save 100 million lives. This is how we're reaching more people. If you could type that in for me, it's greatly appreciated. Number two, if you don't already, subscribe to our feed. By subscribing, you will get access to additional information, to additional videos. You'll also get updates when we take a new video live. I do about 7 live videos a week for you and for your education so that you can improve your health and your wellness. Additionally, make sure you come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. That's my foundation. Make sure you come over there if you're interested in the gluten-free diet, you want to learn more about it, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll get you lots of great information coming your way about how to navigate a healthy gluten-free diet. This is Dr. Osborne wishing you an excellent week. We'll see you next Monday, same time, 6 p.m. Texas time, for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Have a great night. Hey, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, for another Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show. Bring all your toughest health questions to me. I look forward to answering them. And before you leave today, make sure you hit subscribe. And once you do, click that bell. That bell is going to allow us to remind you right before we go live. But it's also going to allow us to remind you when we come out with other video content all week long. We've got lots of episodes coming your way all week long, and I don't want you to miss anything. So again, subscribe, hit that bell so that you can get notified when we have that new information put up for you. Thanks so much, and I'm wishing you excellent health. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday night.